Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Luke Johnson from Noetic, the intelligent social media platform, back with installment 3 of William Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell with Sophie Le Corre. Today, we are going to attempt to cover the first A Memorable Fancy from the poem and the Proverbs of Hell. And, we had a little bit of some technical difficulties, some internet connectivity issues. And so we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants a little bit. I think we're going to turn out a good show for you today. But Sophie and I didn't get the chance to powwow beforehand about how we'd want to do things. Perhaps, Sophie, would you want to recite the A Memorable Fancy part for everyone, and then we'll do a diagnosis of it?
Yes, and I'm just laughing silently right now because I see there is the word fire in the first sentence.
For those of you paying attention, you all know how much I enjoy. One of my favorite things in the world is watching and listening to Sophie say the word fire. So there's just there's just something about it. I know you guys can only really hear her, but if you see her, the way her face lights up when she says it. So why don't you get us started?
Yes, I have to stop laughing now.
Be very serious.
As I was walking among the fires of hell, delighted with the enjoyments of genius, which to angels look like torment and insanity, I collected some of their proverbs, thinking that as the sayings used in a nation mark its character, so the proverbs of hell show the nature of infernal wisdom better than any description of buildings or garments. When I came home on the abyss of the five senses, where flat-sided steep frowns over the prison world, I saw a mighty devil, folded in black clouds, hovering on the sides of the rock. With corroding fires he wrote the following sentence, now perceived by the minds of men, and read by them on earth. How do you know but every bird that curts the airy way is an immense word of delight, close by your senses five.
Nicely done. I think there's something about your French accent that brings a certain gravitas to the poem, even though it says a memorable fancy, which indicates that there might be something frivolous about it. The first thing that I wanted to point out here is I I was like, well, why is he calling this a memorable fancy? And so I dug into it a little bit, and apparently this is a direct satirical take of the five memorable relations that are within Emanuel Swedenborg's larger book called Apocalypse Revealed. And I actually did some recordings. I did all five memorable relations, and currently they're just on the Noetic YouTube channel. You can check them out. But this is a clear reference to Emanuel Swedenborg. And so throughout the rest of the poem, we're going to see other memorable fancies as well. Did you know that this was a reference to the Swedenborg memorable relations from Apocalypse Revealed, Sophie?
No, I didn't know this.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think if what I'd like to do is to orient us. I would like to read some excerpts from that memorable relation so we understand what we're talking about. Uh, if if I may, if you just give me a minute, here are a few paragraphs from that first memorable fancy. One day I was meditating upon the creation of the universe. I'm sorry, the memorable relation from Swedenborg. One day I was meditating upon the creation of the universe, and this being perceived by the angels above me on the right side, where were some who from time to time meditated and reasoned on this subject. One of them descended and invited me to join them, and coming into the spirit, I went with him, And having joined them, I was taken to the prince, in whose palace I saw some hundreds assembled with the prince in the midst. Then one of them said, "We perceived here that you were meditating upon the creation of the universe, and we too have sometimes indulged in like meditation. But we have never been able to reach a conclusion because there clung to our thoughts the idea of a chaos, as having been the great egg, as it were, out of which each thing and all things in the universe in their order were hatched. Whereas we now perceive that so great a universe could not have been so brought forth. Then there also clung to our minds another idea, namely that all things were created by God out of nothing. But we are now able to see that out of nothing, nothing comes. From these two ideas, we have never yet been able to extricate our minds and to see with any degree of clearness how creation was accomplished. Therefore, we have called you from the place where you were, that you might set forth your meditation on this subject. Having heard this, I replied, I will do so. And I said, I have meditated on the subject for a long time, but to no purpose. But since I have been introduced by the Lord into your world, I have perceived how idle it would be to try to form a conclusion about the creation of the universe without first knowing that there are two worlds, one in which angels are, and the other in which men are, and that men through their death pass from their world to the other. I then also saw that there are two suns, one from which all spiritual things flow, and the other from which all natural things flow, and that the Son from which all spiritual things flow is nothing but love from Jehovah God, who is in its midst, and who and that the Son from which all natural things flow is nothing but fire. Fire. Having learned these
Fire.
having learned these facts at one time, when in a state of enlightenment, I was permitted to perceive that the universe was created by Jehovah God by means of the Son in the midst of which he is. As there can be no love apart from wisdom, that the universe was created by Jehovah God from his love by means of his wisdom. The truth of this is evinced by all things and each thing I have seen in the world where you are and the world where I am in the body. So, the main thing I want to point out here is in Swedenborg's memorable relations, at least in this first one, there are five, as I said earlier, we're being shown this dichotomy. There's a place where the angels are, where the devils are, and these are divided and they are separated. And we're talking about Blake's poem here, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where these things are oftentimes mixed together and can be a little bit hard for us to untangle and problematic. Now, the whole thing about there being two suns and all of that, well, I'm not going to go too much into the Swedenborg thing. That's a whole other uh, ball of wax. But the main thing I wanted to point out there is that in the memorable relations, he's trying to illustrate these differences in these realms.
Yes. Um, like I said, we are talking about opposites again. So maybe in order to, if some people want to go deeper in the problem of the opposites, I recommended last time Jung's book Mysterium Conjunctionis in about the problem of the opposites in alchemy. And so with Blake's the marriage of heaven and hell, it is the same subject. And I think Jung didn't invent all of this. He read what a lot of previous thinker wrote about this subject, and I think Blake may have read the same sources as Jung, and I would like to take an example of which is very well known, because I believe Socrates talked about this, the emotion of being cynical. Someone who is cynical is someone who used to be very idealistic. So being idealistic and cynical is two sides of the same coin. So it's the opposites may describe a same reality, but in two different shapes.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I used to have many fanciful, idealistic notions about how the world worked, and I think many people would describe me as one of the most cynical individuals they know now. I think maybe you can relate to that a little as well. I think we're both kind of romantics in a way, frustrated romantics, aren't we?
Yes, I can relate to this so much, and I think the reason why we are like this is that we are putting the bar very high. We have
Yes.
very high expectations of how the world and ourselves should be, and of course we are being disappointed.
You can say that again. Yeah. Um, what I thought was interesting is also is that this sort of in it, we've as we've discussed this poem, we've brought in Emanuel Swedenborg, we've brought in Immanuel Kant, we've brought in Kierkegaard, Jung, uh, Freud, Nietzsche, Milton. Some of these, Blake is preempting, and some of these individuals he's obviously paying respect to. It seems like we're getting a little bit of a nod to Dante here. He's talking about as I was walking among the fires of hell, but it's a little different. He's delighted with the enjoyments of genius. Having read the Divine Comedy somewhat recently, it struck me that this was, you know, kind of a nod to uh, the Inferno.
Yes, and I think it's even clearer in the next in a later part of the poem where he is traveling with an angel uh, to hell and then to heaven.
Yeah, it got a little confusing for me in the second paragraph because I was like, what exactly is going on here? What's the I mentioned this before. He's talks about how he's delighted with the enjoyments of genius, and that the angels looked upon these enjoyments as torment and insanity. It kind of reminded me that the origin of the word genius is connected to a tending spirit. I think we talked a little bit about that last time. But when we get into this part, when I came home on the abyss of the five senses, where a flat side steep frowns over the present world, I saw a mighty devil folded in black clouds hovering on the sides of the rock. With corroding fires, he wrote the following sentence now perceived by the minds of men and read by them on earth. So, what's interesting, we get. I want to talk about this thing that he wrote with his corroding fires about the bird in immense world of delight, but it seems to be kind of an inversion of uh, when Moses was given the tablets, the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, that were actually, I believe, the first set or the second set was actually written with the finger of God. I have to go back and check. So it seemed to be kind of a reference to that. That's what struck me about it. But I didn't quite understand this line, and maybe you can help me. When I came home, I suppose that means coming back to this plane of reality that we all currently inhabit, whatever that means, on the abyss of the five senses. What did you make of this line
Oh,
on the abyss of the five senses? I
as
feel
a,
like I feel like I kind of know what it means, but I feel like I need your help too.
as we are talking about this, I cannot help but think about Baudelaire's The Double Chamber that we studied together. And I think it's the same feeling that Blake is describing when Baudelaire um, he used to be in a vision or in a state of ecstasy, and then he comes back to his chamber
Oh.
where uh, it is the material reality which comes back to him and he's upset about it. And it seems that Blake is calling the material world the abyss of the five senses because he's also upset uh, that he's coming back to this material plane, whereas before he used to be in an ecstatic uh, state.
So, by comparison, the five senses would seem like nothingness after being in an elevated ecstatic state.
Yes, that's how I understand it.
I am so lucky to have you here because I was not quite sure what was going on with that. But I think you accurately explained what Blake is trying to communicate, and hence why so many people like Jim Morrison and Aldous Huxley latch on to this poem. Though we haven't gotten to the line about the doors of perception, we're getting those themes here about uh, flushing out our headgear, as Kubrick would write in or adapt for Full Metal Jacket. We're that we're trapped in by these senses and we need an expansion of consciousness. And one of the ways that we get this expansion of consciousness is this devil figure wants us to meditate on a bird. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, would you like to say something about that?
Yes, I think that it is something we can experience even if we are not using drugs like maybe Jim Morrison or other hippies uh, who are influenced by Blake. Um, I think when we are in a state of contemplation and we are observing nature, like Baudelaire is describing in his poems, because we also studied the confiture of the artist together, and when the poets are able to see nature in a different way than uh, other people. They have this way of seeing the other world, the world which is invisible to the five senses, but because of their poetic way of contemplating contemplating the world, they are able to see the reality which is hidden uh, behind the appearances.
Yeah, and so I think we should talk a little bit about what that reality is. I mean, he says here, how do you know but every bird that cuts the airy way is an immense world of delight closed by your senses five? And my interpretation of that, and I'd like to hear what you think about it. My interpretation of that is that if going off what you said earlier about the senses being this abyss, where I think abyss of like as the I think of an abyss as like nothingness and darkness. And if we're analogizing that to being trapped in by our five senses, then we can't really see what's behind the perceptible object. And in this case, the bird, I think that this devil figure is trying to point to us is trying to tell us that the infinite, okay? I think whatever that word means, I think what he's trying to tell us is that the infinite is ultimately clothed in this sensible object. And if that we could just get ourselves out of the abyss of these senses, we would be able to see the infinite. Now, what does it mean to see the infinite? Well, I think that sort of means to see that there is divine consciousness in it all. And so I think what Blake is going to be pushing us towards is a view known as panpsychism. Um, and it's an alluring view, but I'm not sure it's one as someone from my perspective as being a Christian can necessarily endorse, because I think it in some way means that the very atoms that make up the bird itself are alive with consciousness.
Um, that's not how I understood it.
Well, that's okay. We can understand it differently. Help me understand how you saw it.
Uh, yes, I just wanted to say that the word infinite also made me think about the Confiteor of the Artist by Baudelaire, because I just found it, and in this poem, Baudelaire said, for there are certain delicious sensations whose vagueness does not prevent them from being intense, and none more keen than the perception of the infinite. And then he says, he has great delight who drowns his gaze in the immensity of sky and sea. And the way I understand it is both Blake and Baudelaire, um, it's not that they're not animists. Maybe that's how you understood it. That is it in English animist as well?
The terms are so difficult to pin down. I called it panpsychism, like that everything in the world has consciousness, and it is has its own uh, mental reality to it.
Yes, and that's not how I understood it, because having read Jung, I
Mm-hmm.
think his his view is more the is more uh, like the romantic view, which is that the external world is a reflection of the internal world. So
Yeah.
Jung has this concept of synchronicity, and synchronicity is not so much about coincidences, but it's more about the external world being um, influenced, or not influenced, but events happening in the external world are correlated with events which are happening in the subjective world. And so I see that Blake, I think Blake is this has the same view that when he observes a bird, it's not so much that the bird that he is observing, but his own soul.
That's Yeah, I think that reading would fit. I mean, it really just comes down to, do we swing the pendulum the exact opposite way, and we go from a position where everything is consciousness to the position where there's just one subject, and the subject is me. And
Yes,
all the, so it's kind of a pick your poison scenario. You have It's almost like there's the universe is composed of one mind, or multiple minds that are fused into a higher mind, or that the one mind is us. And I guess my only hesitancy with that is that, obviously, Sophie, like last week, I want you to be a person, which you replied to that question as, when
perhaps.
perhaps it stuck with me. I'm like, oh, because I asked Sophie, I said, Sophie, you are a person. She goes, perhaps, leaving it open that she is a projection of my unconscious. I said, you are deeply committed to your Jungian principles. And I have to say, when we get done with Blake, I'm going to try to entice you into doing a series on Jung, because I have to do so much Jungian research, especially about synchronicity and some of this other stuff. I'm going to see if I can bait you into doing that. But yeah, I mean, I guess my hesitancy is that we go to this other perspective where we turn ourselves into like the god of our realm, because we're the only real mind that's projecting all this stuff.
Yes, speaking about Jung, I don't think it's his opinion either. I think it's we have two um, extreme um, views, but maybe uh, the Blake's views and Jung's view of reality could be something in between, that
Yeah.
we have a multitude of subjects, not only one, but these subjects interact with the external world, and the external world is not separated from their subjectivity.
So then are those subjects' minds interconnected?
That's a possibility.
Or could they be interconnected but still be individuated?
Yes, I think that would be Jung's view.
Interesting. Well, I want to go deeper into it. But we've got Blake to address here. Did you want to say anything else about this part of the poem before we went on to the Proverbs of Hell part? The Proverbs of Hell part is outside of the line about the doors of perception, might be the most famous part of the marriage of heaven and hell. Um, what say you, Sophie? What would you like to do?
I'm just reading quickly what we just. Okay. Maybe we could go on and start the Proverbs of Hell if you want.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to read them, or do you want to take turns? Or I was kind of thinking about when I looked at I started to review my notes on it last night, and I was like, oh man, you know what? There's you could break down every single one of them because they're kind of an inversion of, like, in my opinion, just pretty much everything biblical. There are a couple that aren't, and it's kind of long. So I don't know if we need to break down every single one, but maybe the ones that jump out to us to kind of illustrate that. But do you want to take turns reading? Maybe we should, because it's longer. Like, I'll read some, and then I'll hand it off to you, and then we'll just keep going back and forth. Is that okay?
Yes, we could do this, but I'm just looking at the length of it. Maybe we can read a portion of this and then talk about it.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's do it. Do you want to read the first portion?
Yes, I could read the first 9 lines if you want.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. In seed time, learn. In harvest, teach. In winter, enjoy. Drive your cart and your plough over the bones of the dead. The road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Prudence is a rich, ugly old man courted by incapacity. He who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. The cutworm forgives the plough. Dip him in the river who loves water. A fool sees not the same tree as that a wise man sees. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star.
Yeah, where to even begin with this? I mean, some of them, the inversions may not all be the same. The one that in seed time learn, in harvest teach, in winter enjoy. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna take too much of a axe to that one because I could be potentially misinterpreting it. But this maxim, drive your cart and your plow over the bones of the dead. Well, at least biblically speaking, uh, you know, the dead are to be are not to be treated so callously. Like, uh, burial is an important part of the Bible, and not disturbing the dead. Or this line about the road of excess leads to the palace of wisdom. Well, that's not how the Bible sees it. It's not excess that leads to the palace of wisdom. It's the fear of God. And prudence is not a rich, ugly old maid courted by incapacity. It's far from the case. A lot of the uh, most prudent men in the Bible were highly capable individuals. He who desires but acts not breeds pestilence. Actually, from a biblical perspective, pestilence is sent by those who do exactly the opposite of what God commands in regards to restraint. And he spares those who actually get a hold of their desires and live in a godly way. And I could go on and on here. I mean, I think it's even interesting. He whose face gives no light shall never become a star. Well, in the Bible, stars are angels. So and we're actually supposed to judge angels, so we're never going to become stars. So it every single line in the proverbs of hell, I could go on and on and on about, but they're in direct contradiction to biblical wisdom and the teachings of the Bible, and that's why they're proverbs of hell and not heaven.
Yes, but I think these proverbs should be read a bit the same way as Nietzsche's books, and especially this book, Zarathustra.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, 100%, 100%.
And I think it should not be only read literally, but really maybe using the point of view of the psychologist, or maybe even if we use the word of Nikolai Berdyaev, the Russian philosopher, which I talked about. He used to call Dostoevsky, so I'm going to use the French word and try to translate it, a pneumatologue. So in English, that would be someone who studies the spirit. And so the psychologist studies the psyche, and the pneumatologue would study the spirit. And we talked about previously about a human being a three-part in some Christian traditions. So the human being is soul, body, and spirit. And so if you are talking the language of spirit, you are going to use symbols when you are talking. And so drive your cart and your plough over the bones of the dead. Maybe what he means by this is not that you should not respect the dead, but as in the contrary, that we should take, how do you say this in English? We should continue their job and make their efforts and creation go further.
Right. I think that's what he's getting at on another level of interpretation, is to not be limited by the past, right? To not be limited by air quotes greats or the giants or the geniuses of the past, but to continue to forge your own future, and to be almost irreverent and not to be imprisoned by the old worldviews.
And also to continue their work, not to forget them, but to make their work alive.
Certainly, certainly. I mean, but we can certain. But if this is from the perspective of the devil, and he has, incorporated men into, I don't want to. I'm getting all Bible thumper in this because I can't help it because we're talking about hell. But and I'm glad you're balancing me out with the psychoanalytical approach. Um, it's very possible that there are certain sort of doctrines that the devil wants to see promulgated and blossom in a certain way to confound the man, and so you can't actually discern what godly wisdom is from the secular.
From from my understanding, I think Blake is being provocative here.
Yeah, and he's succeeding, isn't he? I mean,
Yes,
I think we're having a very provocative conversation.
yes,
So
and I think he's using the words hell and devil, maybe not in the same way as you are using them, because in my opinion, he's almost like a rock musician, um, that he using the words hell and devil to express his, like we said before, his feeling of rebellion. And rather than being exactly the character of the biblical character of the devil.
Well, that raises some interesting questions about who a lot of rock musicians are actually in allegiance with, but that's a whole other
Yes,
subject.
yes, but I think some of them are doing this on purpose because some musicians may be Satanists, but I think a lot of them are not, and they are using these images, this symbolism, only to shock people and to to express their rebellion.
Yeah. I, yeah, I think there's a lot. As someone who spent a lot of years doing music, I mean, I didn't always view music this way, and when people would make the devil horns and talk about rock and roll and rebellion and stuff like that, I wasn't viewing it through a biblical lens whatsoever. It's only now I look back on it and I was like, ooh, I think I was mixed up in more than I ever understood. And but
And
I can't really say that on the air.
uh, when we prepared for this podcast series about marriage of heaven and hell, I talked to you about, and we talked about her in the last podcast.
Oh
Annick de
yeah,
Souzenel, who
she's she's an Orthodox Christian with some unorthodox views, right?
yes, and her unorthodox views. She says that they are inspired by her reading of the Bible in Hebrew, and
Right.
so in when she translates the Genesis, she says that the word which is translated as evil in English and French as well actually does not mean evil in Hebrew. That in Hebrew, evil is in her translation means what is not accomplished. So the trees of good and evil would be the trees of what is accomplished and what is not accomplished. And this would be similar to what we know, what we now know about quantum physics and the notion of the quantum vacuum. So the evil would be could be correlated with the quantum, could be which word can I use? Could be equated with the quantum vacuum, and the good would be the manifested reality.
So like the difference between the visible matter and the dark matter. It's like kind of what we're
Uh,
getting at here.
I don't know about. No, I'm not sure it is the dark matter. I think that when we think, you think about um, um, virtual particles, perhaps. The virtual particles are not in the manifested reality, but they somehow interact with it.
Right. In like the realm of possibility or something.
Yes.
Whatever that means, yeah.
I think that's what she means in her understanding of the tree of good and evil.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, should we move on to the next part of the Proverbs of Hell, or do you want to say more about these 9 lines?
Um, yes, the problem of excess. I don't know if
Sure.
it's later in the poem where Blake that says that we can only know the right amount of something. We can only know the degree in which something is right, the right amount of something, if we haven't known excess. And perhaps it's true that in reality we live under we live we do not live our potential. We tend to limit ourselves, and we do not achieve all that we could have achieved. And this would be in consistence with that what I just said about the translation of evil as what is not accomplished, because maybe Blake means that it is also a kind of sin not to accomplish our potential.
Yeah, I think it's the question about how is that potential defined, and ultimately, what is the potential that we're supposed to be actualizing with the life that we have? You know, is it to create great works of genius, or is it to, you know, engage in the bacchanalian frenzy and pull back from it and understand that that is ultimately an empty life path? You know, how what potentialities are we actually supposed to actualize?
Yes, maybe Blake, being a romantic, he thinks about the creativity, the artistic creativity, and someone like Jung or Annick de Souzenel would rather think about the in- internal life of the individual. So the potential of the individual would be parts of of his or her personality, which exists, but which has not came to consciousness yet. For instance, I have a potential to be mm, yes. For instance, I am very jealous of my neighbor because my neighbor is very good public speaker, or I don't know, and maybe it's my charisma which I am not seeing, my own charisma. I don't know.
Well, if I can compliment you, I was thinking about the past couple Blake podcasts that we've done, and I've really enjoyed every single one we've done, including this one. Um, your command of the English language in the time that I've known you has really progressed. I don't know if it's something that you work on, but it's easier for me to talk to you in English than it is for me to talk to other English speakers. And I just wanted to let you know that you've done a great job developing that aspect of yourself.
I didn't work much, but I listened to a lot of videos in
Well,
and podcasts in English.
well, yeah, I was gonna say if it weren't for your accent, I think you could pass almost as a native English speaker now. The only thing that gives it away is your accent.
Yes,
And
it's I cannot pronounce well some words.
but but I'll say this: you speak you speak English better than many people I talk to who speak English. So, in my opinion, we've been doing these things off and on for I don't know how many years now, maybe 3 or 4. And the chain the it seems to me that you've found another gear with it this year. It's really progressed this year. And so I wanted to make sure. I don't know if you had noticed that about yourself, but yeah, you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you should I don't think you have any reason to envy your neighbor for public speaking because you're doing a fantastic job.
Thank you. But it was just an example. It was
Sure,
not
but
true.
I know, but you said it and it reminded me, and I just all week long I was like, man, Sophie is doing so. She's doing so well with her English. It's becoming so effortless to have these conversations. It's so enjoyable, and I just wanted to let you know that I thought that.
Thank you. But there are still words which I cannot find.
I still struggle to find the words to express myself in English, and I couldn't even begin to have a conversation in French. So don't worry, it happens. It happens to the best of us. Uh,
So yes, we. Do you want me to just add a few remarks which I still have about these lines, or
well, I think it really depends. We've been going for about 50 minutes, and we have a lot of proverbs of hell to cover. Unless we just want to like take our time with the proverbs of hell and not worry about trying to finish it today. Do you want to just proceed naturally and we'll just pick up where we left off next time, or do you want to try to get through them all?
um, I will.
I'm happy to do either. It's really just a matter of what you feel comfortable with.
I think if we read all of them today, we may maybe rush too much and.
Okay. Yeah, then yeah, let's just keep doing what we're doing, and yeah, go ahead and lay those other remarks on us.
Because the proverbs are, each line is very on a different subject than the
Yeah.
previous one.
Yeah, it really is.
So it's not like we could extract a global meaning from the paragraph.
Sure, 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 sure. So yeah, keep going. Do what you're doing.
Yes. One other proverbs which I found interesting is, a fool sees not the same tree that a wise man sees.
Yeah,
And
that one really jumped out at me as well. And I think it's true and false at the same time, which is it gets into the quantum, but I want to hear what you have to say about it.
I think if we take the previous interpretation of seeing the infinite in a bird, which is that when the poet sees the external world, he's actually observing his own soul. It means that the subjectivity has an effect on how we actually what we perceive from the external reality is colored by our subjectivity. And so this is quite ordinary to say this. It's but we do not, we most people know this, but they do not really think deeply about it. They think that they are being objective, and I think the people who think they are the most objective, especially scientists, and scientists who have a, or people who have a materialist worldview, they think of themselves as being objective, and they are completely unaware of how much their subjectivity influence their perceptions.
So it raises the interesting question about the most learned. Are they the materialistic scientist, the materialist scientist, if he's looking at the tree? Is he the fool or the wise man? Because the way that we're talking about it, it seems like he would be the fool. And that really the simpleton or the child and the enlightened uh, 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 lama or whatever is actually able to see more than the person who could describe every single phylogenetic uh, manifestation of the tree to you. It, the wise man is able to see beyond the details of the tree.
Yes, and this would be consistent with Blake's own um, repulsion against the prison of the five senses.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I think that what I like about this is that there could be, depending on how you understand what you're looking at. Okay, I could take this one line and break it down. There could be, I could say, okay, well, who's the fool? I could take the common man in the street who doesn't think abstractly at all. I could take the materialist. I could take I could have 7 varieties of fools if I sat down here and made a list. And then I could have 7 varieties of wise men. But then I could rank those wise men, and they themselves would be more wise than other wise men, therefore making those previous wise men on the list fools compared to them. So it seems like there might be this spectrum of fools and wise men when they view something like a tree. And it's not just that there's one type of fool and one type of wise man. Now Blake may be trying to say that the materialist is unwise compared to the man who sees through the particularities, but I would contend that there are a lot more types of fools, and a lot more types of wise men than meets the eye. That's what I would contend.
Yes, I didn't think about. I haven't thought about it like you did.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking about it on the fly, and I think again, we're going back to seeing the infinite of the tree. You know, there could be something foolish about that if we're ultimately. I defined it earlier. We went through these 2 pendulum swings, the panpsychism and that of seeing your soul reflected in the tree. And both of those may be wiser than a materialist perspective, but they also still may be deeply in error. They could be wiser than the fool's position, but they still, relative to future discoveries, future enlightenment, could still be foolish by comparison. Who plays the fool and who plays the wise man?
Yes, I
Becomes
think
it switches around.
your view is interesting because it would I do it could be a hierarchical um, uh, conception of uh, perception, which means that what you see is a consequence of your level of spiritual development. So there would be different levels of development, and at each level you would see a different reality.
Can I let you know what I see when I look at a tree?
Yes.
I don't see a tree at all.
Okay.
So I don't know what that makes me.
A fool or wise
I
man.
I I I see
Maybe
a
both.
shrub. I see a shrub.
A shrub. Oh, I don't know this word.
A bush.
A bush. Okay.
But that's a whole other can of worms.
Okay.
If anyone's interested, they should check out Devil's Tower. Are you familiar with the Devil's Tower?
No.
It's a geological feature that we have here in the United States. Uh, it's like a mesa. I don't know if they have them in France. They have them in Australia and other places, but these these yeah, you can check it out. The Devil's Tower. Have you ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
No, I haven't.
It's where I believe Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I think they make contact with the aliens in that movie, or they have something goes down at the Devil's Tower. It's featured very prominently in that movie. Richard Dreyfuss like sculpts it in his mashed potatoes, so it's funny. So maybe we should we do one more stanza of these and then kind of call it a day? But
Yes.
I think it'll take us a while to get through these. But do you mind if I read
Yes.
it?
Yes. Go on.
Eternity is in love with the productions of time. The busy bee has no time for sorrow. The hours of folly are measured by the clock, but of wisdom no clock can measure. All wholesome food is caught without a net or a trap. Bring out number, weight, and measure in a year of dearth. No bird soars too high if he soars with his own wings. A dead body revenges not injuries. The most sublime act is to set another before you. If the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. Folly is the cloak of knavery, shame is pride's cloak. So, just eternity is in love with the productions of time. Again, I find this from a biblical perspective to be uh, simultaneously true and untrue. Obviously, God is interested in doing a act of redemption to His creation. So I imagine there's got to be some dissatisfaction that there was a fall to begin with, and all the different effects that flow from that. But ultimately, there is great salvific love in the crucifixion of His Son Jesus Christ. So I I struggle with this one a little bit, but I think I could see how this could be both true and false from a biblical perspective, even though it's a proverb of hell. And we have another contradictory one here. The busy bee has no time for sorrow. Uh, this fixation with work, with staying busy, uh, not allowing time for sorrow, for reflection, for meditation. I think this is kind of anti-biblical. There's not really a sabbatical sense to it. There's not really the opportunity to grieve. Grieving and emotions are important, biblically speaking. I did find this one interesting. The hours of folly are measured by the clock, but of wisdom, no clock can measure. Uh, I do not. I think there's some truth to this. I don't sit back and think about, oh man, like uh, I, I, I don't apply some sort of calendar to wisdom that I've accrued over the years, but I certainly do um, have regrets about years spent in folly, and they seem to be measurable time periods. So I think there's some truth in that. All wholesome food is caught without a net or a trap. Uh, uh, Jesus' disciples were fishermen. Jesus ate fish. This is not a problem. Uh, fishermen use nets. Perhaps I'm taking this too literally. Weighing things in years of dearth seems kind of like a pointless activity. I could go on and on here, but I mean, I don't need to go through every single one, but this is just some initial thoughts. But we do have that line that you alluded to earlier about how if the fool persists in his folly, he would become wise. Perhaps everyone sort of bottoms out and realizes their wretchedness and is ultimately bestowed with the, I guess, air quotes, Christ mind. But uh, I'm not, I'm not convinced that one has to be a fool in order to have that wisdom. So anyhow, those are some initial thoughts. I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, I love the line the hours of folly are measured by the clock, but of wisdom no clock can measure. Because this week I have been thinking about this so much because at work I was very stressed because when you work in computer science IT services company as a programmer, you have to time is very much I'm looking for a word.
Of the
Is
essence.
no. It means it's someone who is very bossy. Uh, he's a dictator. Time
Right.
is the dictator.
Right.
You have to plan how much time you are going to spend on each task, and if you are taking too much time, your boss is going uh, be to summon you about it because you are costing money to the company. So it's not. It happens also in other sectors, perhaps, but it's very much what I hate about working in IT services because we are constantly reminded that we should not spend too much time on each task and how time is money. And it seems to me that a lot of things that we do at work, or especially at work, this and maybe this is also reflected in Chaplin's movie about the industry, modern times, I think.
Do you say Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin?
Charlie Chaplin, yes.
I haven't seen that one. Charlie Chaplin's very popular in France, isn't he?
Yes,
Well,
I
it's
don't know.
well by compare. It's interesting. I've developed a little bit of an interest in Charlie Chaplin um, through his movie The Great Dictator. Is that what it was called? The Great Dictator, um, where he's
Yeah.
satirizing Hitler, and but a lot of them in America we don't really. And I also got interested in Chaplin because there's a connection to J.D. Salinger. Apparently, Charlie Chaplin stole the lover of J.D. Salinger away from him. He married this much younger woman, but so yeah, it's we don't. I don't think a lot of modern Americans think too much about Charlie Chaplin. But I from what I heard recently, he's still quite popular in France.
Yes, I was talking about his movie Modern Times,
I've
which
never
is
seen that one. Yeah.
about the modern industrialized world. It's
Is
about
is
the
it a
work.
is it a silent movie?
Uh, Probably. Actually, I haven't seen it, but we talk a lot about this, and I've seen extracts of it. But it's about the life of someone who works in industry, in a factory,
Right.
and how in it's today, even in more intellectual jobs, you are very much constrained by time and money. And I think Blake would view these activities as folly, because Blake, being a romantic, would think that poetry is more important than productivity, in industry or IT or other jobs, more pragmatic jobs.
Well, I think a lot of us are starting to question what the point of productivity is. For a whole variety of reasons. I think a lot of us are starting to. I think a lot of us are starting to be concerned that our productivity is actually building our own prison.
Yes. and especially with the environmental issues and the resources depletion issue as well.
Yeah.
The way we live, consuming and producing in huge proportions, we are actually living above the earth. The resources of the earth.
Yeah, I know you've always been more concerned about the environmental stuff. I'm not unconcerned with it. I think the thing that I feel from existentially about it is I don't I to be honest, everything being cyber, it seems like there's you know a limitless amount of resources to make that happen. I could be wrong, but it almost feels the more that we are, um, especially in light of uh, you know lockdowns and everything like that. Uh, it's almost like we're being confined in a cyber way to being on our machines all the time and being within our home, and we're not really able to commune with our fellow humans and the environment like we ought to be.
Yes,
It
but
seems very technocratic. It seems that uh, seems I have my neighbors have dogs, and they have an electric fence, and I can't help but wonder if something similar is being built around us.
an electric fence.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah. So these dogs, they wear collars, and so if they get too close to the edge of the property, they get a shock from
oh,
from the fence. So they don't have to be on a leash. They don't have to be on a physical leash. But if they travel too far, they get a shock from the electric fence. And so over time, they psychologically know to not even go that far to the boundary. So they spend it. I just think it's an appropriate metaphor for what's happening with humanity and our technology.
yes. But I wonder if this is necessary. Uh, Maybe we could argue that reality is um, very well explained by Pascal, the philosopher, when he talks about distraction and how people spend all their lives distracting themselves in order to not feel the tragic pain of the tragic experience of life, which causes pain.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's good to feel pain,
Yes, but
right?
most people don't want to feel pain.
Right. It's good to feel pain because ultimately, uh, this this I mean, I think pain increases empathy and gratitude, and in a way creates more of a dependence on a higher power. And uh, the more that we satiate ourselves, the I think I think we cut off that ability to be connected to others and connected to God. So at least here in the West, in America, we air quotes have it so good, and you know you there's all sorts of ways to get your dopamine hits, and I don't know, you get so many dopamine hits. Do you really have the opportunity to think about difficult things and develop your soul?
Yes, your view is consistent with Pascal's view, and also it reminds me of course, Brave New World and the Soma and
Oh
this world
yes,
of distraction which is created
we
so people feel they are free, but they are a slave of their need for pleasure and pain avoidance.
we were warned. We were warned. No one can say we weren't warned.
Yes, but it's not necessary for. actually a group of people to build such kind of society, even if, of course, this world of the company world who wants to make money, they have interest in people wanting to buy things all the time. So they are going to play on their desire for pleasure.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to say that there's some nefarious plot. It could be just the result of uh, uh, these base emotions of mankind interacting with capitalism. So I'm not a communist. I don't know what I am. I'm like just just want to live off the land or something. Anywho, we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. There's so much to say still about this. We had a nice little aside there, but I wanted to make sure you got to say everything you wanted to say about this passage.
In this passage, there is also my favorite quote of all time, which I think I put on my Facebook cover, which is yes, if the fool would persist in his folly, he would become wise. And the way I understand it is sometimes I feel I'm playing the fool, the archetype of the fool, uh, as Jung would call it, which is the like the idiot of Dostoevsky, and even Jesus could be described as the fool and the saints, as we talked about them, because the world would see them as crazy people. And like Saint Paul would say as well, the wisdom of the world is not the wisdom of God. And
Exactly.
and sometimes I feel like people see I play. How can I say this? What people find crazy, I want to explore it. And when we follow this path of what the world sees as crazy, we can maybe find true wisdom.
Yeah. No, and the Bible tells us to be fools for Christ. So there's also
Yes,
that too.
there is this concept of the fool for Christ in Orthodox Christianity.
Hey, Sophie, I just got a knock at my door, so I think I might
Okay,
have to wrap this up soon. Um,
we can stop there
okay.
if you want.
Okay. I just don't, because I'm doing this at my friend's house, I don't want to abuse his
Okay,
hospitality. Thank you, Sophie, for joining me today. Perhaps we can do this again next Saturday and pick up where we left off. Um, we'll just let me know and we'll schedule it. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope you enjoyed our conversation about Blake's The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and we'll be back with future episodes. Take care.
goodbye everyone, take care.